most of the formulae come from outside, so they really don't develop products as many as we want internally. But whether the Prime Minister says or not, you have to make food in India once the volume reaches a particular level. You cannot import. And at that time, the requirement for food scientists such as you will be enormous. Just go back about 20 years ago when the computer software industry started. People studied software, but they couldn't get good jobs. There were a few centers of excellence, and there was a problem because the supply of software scientists and the demand for software scientists could not be matched properly. A lot of people are frustrated, but that was for a few years. And today you can see how that is transformed completely, and then the software industry knows exactly what kind of people they want, and they are training people to become the world's best software scientists. So the food industry, I'm certain, will become like that in the near future. The basic areas, food processing, and that's where you find the three areas of ingredients, the process itself or the machinery, and the packaging. These three play a role in a factory, and you can play a role too within that factory or at the suppliers of each of those. That is a processing equipment or an ingredient supplier or a packaging manufacturer. I'm making it sound very simple. It's a very complex chain, but you can play a major role in any of those areas or even upstream or downstream of those. Finally, the food service and retail, they are going to be the largest probably in the world next to China or even bigger than China. They will need a lot of people. It's not just about quality control. Food services outside are divided into two parts actually. It's coming into India now. One is called contract catering, which is basically catering to schools, canteens, in offices, prisons, airplanes, those kinds of food. The other one is commercial catering, which is into restaurants all over the world. Now, for each one of them, the requirements are completely different, and they need food scientists to design and develop food. Food is not only nutrition, fuel, etc. We said that, it's also fashion. So when you actually design food for an airline, one of the main things is the visual appeal, the ease of eating, the fact that it should not smell, for example. If you go to supermarkets around the world, the fruit and the vegetables, they will not smell because they've been played around with, whatever you call it as, in order that you can walk around the store without having pungent smells. Now, these are all food science based. You can look at it either way, but those trends are there to stay. And once again, my request is, when you look at food science, do keep the consumer part at the back of your mind, but don't mix the two. Because once you mix the two, you're neither a food scientist nor a consumer. And that is the big danger that many food scientists today do. You can't be both at the same time. You will have to be impassionate when you are looking at food science, but always keep the consumer in mind. It's not you, it's somebody else. And that's the way I look at food science all the time. So you have here a whole range of technologies. These are just examples, but there are many, many modern technologies. For example, if you just take encapsulation today, the length and breadth of encapsulation technologies is stupendous. Today you do it with yeast and every other thing that you can find, and all it has become, the cost has become very low. So today one talks about putting encapsulated flavors in even chewing gums, very low cost chewing gums. You can do a lot with these technologies where your role is enormously important, and in fact without people such as yourselves, those just don't work. So they need very, very good food scientists. And in all these, as you know very well, the base, which is the quality control, the new product development, the R&D, these are the departments, but they manifest themselves across all these and more. So your opportunities, once again, are almost limitless from the point of view. Just to give you one example, Just give you one small example. If you take just soy and you see how many things one can do and one does today, and where you can play a role. You can do nutraceutical fractions. They are very well known right now. You can take proteins, many types of proteins, and play around with them. These are emulsifiers, antioxidants, those kinds of ingredients you can take out. And also, you must have heard of soy milk, soy oil, all kinds of consumer products. And each one of them requires food science. And you see here how many processes you can go through and how many parts of soy you can actually take products out of. And each one requires food science. Just to give you a tiny example of soy. And now when you multiply this across the spectrum of food, again the challenges are immense, and I would say the opportunities are immense. This is being done now in India. Many of these are being done in India. Not all. Why? Because on one hand the knowledge is limited, and on the other hand the demand is not there yet. But when that demand comes in, it has to be produced in India, as I keep saying, once the volumes go beyond a particular level. And you people once again can play a very, very strong role. When you take an ingredient in a product, roughly we say it's about 1/10 the value of the total product. Why? Because there are other elements to a product. Once you make a product, you have other costs, processing costs, packaging costs, distribution costs, the margins, etc. And finally the consumer gets it. So the ingredients, they do play a role to the extent of around 10%. But this is a very rough number. But that ingredient choice happens interactively with all the other departments of the company. And that's where you as food scientists will play a very strong role. So today, the R&D department will have to work iteratively with the costing department, with the marketing department, with all the other, the purchase department. So you really work with all the others before you come to a final product. And this is something that you ought to be aware of, that as a food scientist, you will not just be sitting in a little lab throughout your life, just mixing something and then delivering it. No, you're making food, and as we said, food is a very complex product with lots of emotions, traditions, culture apart from the science. So you need to interact with all these people to put that food together. And that's what you see here. All these various aspects come in, the consumer trust, the clean label, and many, many other issues, which will all come back to you. And they will say that you need to make a product. What is a clean label? And you as a food scientist, you may not agree with it, but if the marketing person says the clean label is the only thing we want, you need to find a way for it, or you need to find another company to work for. So it's going to be a huge challenge for you to interact with other departments in a company and then come to a holistic food which the consumer wants. You might have heard of some of these companies, but how many of you have heard of many of these which are very, very large ingredient suppliers in the world? And you will all be interacting with many of them, if not working with many of them. They're all very keen to set up shop in India, to be in India as India grows in the food industry. We are very aware because we are at the front end with all these people. They will all be here, and they're already here, and probably I will see many of you working for many of these companies in the future. Just examples, you can see some of the challenges that you're also likely to face. We've been thrown these challenges. One of the mega-sized companies in the world asked us, hey, how do we develop processed flavors? You know processed flavors, I hope. It's the Maillard reaction flavors. How do we develop them as natural molecules through the year 2020. How do we do that? So these are challenges which are almost fundamental in the food industry today. And you may all be part of it. I'm not saying that tomorrow they're going to ask you this question. If you do find the answer, probably one of you will get a Nobel Prize. It's very tough, but you may all be part of that kind of an adventure. Again, somebody may come to you as the R&D or the food scientist and say, look, we would like to buy this company with some kind of sweetener. Can you make similar sweeteners? Can we make that at the commercial level? Do we have such a technology? Do we understand that technology? Does it work for us? For example, fermentation. I always call fermentation half science because nobody really understands why that particular bug likes that particular protein and works in that particular substrate. It's very difficult. Even large fermenters have been to, including those in Japan, Korea, and Europe, and in the US, they never touch any of those elements because they're very worried that once at a commercial level it starts to work, it may not work properly. So you will be faced with those challenges and you need to be prepared for those. Again, about customers, about consumers, low salt, low sugar, you may have to work on them. Why? Because consumers are demanding for them. So the same ingredient, can I work on a low salt version? So it's all again consumer related.